So we are going to move on to product pricing. Now, this can also be very directly related to your activities for Q4. What I've seen, even in my own business, when we do product development and getting products ready for our clients, is that you have to ensure that your products are priced in a way that allows your business to be sustainable. I know it is very easy to develop products and say, okay, I will just price it based on what is currently on the market. So I'll just look at a competing product, at a similar product, and say, well, mine is similar to that, so I'll just price it in a similar way. And the challenge with that approach is that you run the risk of not factoring in costs. And when you do not factor in costs, all your costs, you will find over time that your business is not actually making any money. And if you do not spend the time now and during the early phases of product development to properly price your products, to price them for profits, then you are essentially building a business on sand. Okay, you're building a business that will not be able to stand the competition in the market. And I know it is oftentimes a difficult thing to do, to price your products, only because there are so many different inputs that go into a single unit of product. And the purpose of this particular spreadsheet is to help you think through your actual product costs in detail. So this is actually a part of the Price for Profit Masterclass. If you have not yet watched this, it's a very, very useful, it's very in-depth, but it will help you to come up with to understand the basis of pricing products. So it doesn't matter how large your business is, whether you're a one-man or one-woman shop, or if you have a team, if you're a bigger brand, this will definitely help you in determining the best approaches to pricing your products. And it is not just as easy as we see all the time, add up all the cost of your raw materials and your packaging materials and multiplying it by 2 and multiplying it by 4. That is not the way to price your products. That will either end up in an overestimation where you're pricing yourself out of the market, or an underestimation where you simply cannot sustain your business. So it is very important if you're in the product development phase. So if you have a formulation that you are comfortable with from a quality control perspective and from a user testing perspective, if you're comfortable with your products, now is a good time to start pricing your products. During your conceptualization phase, you should have a rough idea of the price point that you want to go with for your product, but this needs to be justified through an actual pricing strategy or pricing exercise. So in this particular masterclass, it goes through the cost of goods. So these are all your direct inputs, your overhead costs, and your profit margins. And then it helps you to essentially come up with a strategy for your products. So it's very in-depth. These are actually the slides. So if it is easier for you to just read through instead of listening to a course or a presentation, just go ahead and download the slides, put it on your phone, and you can take your time and go through. And I will definitely help you to ensure that you have all the different bits and pieces covered. So it goes through examples, it covers all the different components. How do you come up with labor costs? How do you come up with overhead costs, etc.? Okay. The masterclass is actually a video, so you can go ahead and play that and watch it while you go through the slides to go through. What we will go through today is the pricing calculator. So this tutorial, I will save this section and I will save it as a video and I will upload it here so that you have a kind of over the shoulder tutorial on how to use it. But for now, we're gonna go ahead and download the pricing calculator. So just to go back, if you go on to, when you log in and go into dashboard, it's right here. You will click on access now. If you're watching this video later on, this thumbnail is not likely to be there. We will pull this down at the end of the month. What you could do is go into courses, and then you can go into price for profit. And then here at the tab, it's the very last selection there, pricing calculator, and just click download calculator. So now I'm going to walk, okay, when you click on that, you're gonna get access to this template. Just click use template. So you're gonna need a Google account, which you should have, a Gmail, G Drive, and just click use template, and then this will open up into your Google account, and you can save it wherever you wish. Now, this pricing calculator, you can have one copy of it for each product, or you can have one calculator and simply repeat the product costing tab for each product. And I'll walk you through as we go on, but it's really up to you. If you have many products, it may make sense that you have one calculator for each category, or you can have one calculator for each product. Or if you just have a small inventory, you can just have the one calculator and just repeat the tabs for each product. It's really up to you. Just ensure that you're setting it up in a way that it's easy for you to reference. Okay, so we're gonna go through step by step how to utilize it. So the very first page you have is a setup page. You're going to simply select your currency. Okay, so there's some different currency options there, and you're going to select your currency. I'm choosing dollars here. Then you're going to enter your categories, your different, effectively the different options you have for each of these categories. So I'm going to use an example now. I've created an example. So let's say body oil. Here is a body oil. I've come up with a very simple formulation for body oil. And for that body oil, I have these ingredients. So I'm just copying that just for ease, and I'm gonna paste values only. Okay, so coconut oil, sweet almond oil, jojoba oil, vitamin E, and rosemary, because those are the items. Now what you'll find is that this is a rosemary body oil. If you have, let's say, a lavender body oil, the only difference might be the fragrance, right? So you may have just add lavender body oil. And the reason why I mentioned earlier, you could have one pricing calculator for a group of products is that you don't have to keep re-entering this information over and over. You will just have a running list of all the different raw materials that you could have, or you have in a group of products, and you will just have this as a running list. So every time you buy a raw material, you can just add it to the list and it will populate in the spreadsheet. You can do the same thing for packaging. So for now, I'm going to say it's put in a bottle with cap. And then there is a vinyl label. Okay, that's sticker label that goes on. Now, labor, I like to differentiate. Well, it really depends on your particular scenario. Whenever you're doing your production or your formulations, when you get to more manufacturing, there are different types of activities that you may do, and the cost for each activity may be different. So for example, you may have production as one item. You may have labeling as another item. You may have packaging as another activity. You may have shipping as another activity. So to make your products, there are different types of activities. And as you grow, you may find that your cost for these different types of labor activity may be different. So you, for example, as the owner, you may be the one who does the production, but you may hire somebody who is cheaper than you to do labeling, packaging, and shipping, because that is less technical. They just need some very specific instructions to do that. But if you are the person who, you are the person in charge of more quality control, you may decide that you're going to be doing the production activities, and that rate of labor, the cost of labor for production, is going to be very different than if you're just hiring a kind of lower wage labor for things like labeling, packaging, shipping. If you're working alone, you may just have one category, call it production, and then you just have one standard rate of pay. And this will make a lot more sense if you've never done product pricing before. Watch the masterclass, and this will make a lot of sense to you, a lot more sense, because I go through each of these categories, what they mean in terms of the inputs in products. And then other could mean things like, so if after doing your production run, you use a pH test, right? A litmus paper, for example, that would be something that I would include as a direct cost. Or you may use a dip slide, for example, just to do your own internal quality control checks for microbes. And you may use one per batch, right? So that's an example. So you may use dip slides for microbe. For each time you make a batch, you may do your own quality control check. Okay, and that's something you can include as a direct cost. You may have the option of including it as an overhead cost, but again, as you watch the masterclass, you can decide what you would include as a direct cost and what you would include as a indirect cost or overhead. Speaking of indirect costs, now this is an area that so many of us refuse to include in our pricing. We just totally ignore the fact that there are costs that have to be accounted for in our products that are not direct costs. So overhead costs are all the other costs, so they're not direct inputs, so they're not raw material, packaging, other labor. So they are not direct costs in the products. Instead, these are costs that are required to keep your business afloat. So let us say, for example, you're running your business from your home. You do your production in your kitchen. So you have a separate cabinet area for your supplies, and you do your production in your kitchen at home. Your home comes at a cost, and that cost has to be built into your products in some way. Because if you do not build them into your products, when you start to scale and you now have to rent a small area, you're going to now find that you have no room within your product pricing to factor in those overhead costs. So you should always, if you are doing the production, even if you're not doing the production, but you are running a business, there are overhead costs. There are indirect costs that you have to factor in. So how do we calculate these overhead costs? Now, it's a little tricky, but it is not difficult. And it's a very, very insightful exercise once you go through it. And the good news is that once you do this exercise, once you complete this tab once, you do not have to complete it again unless you have considerable changes in overhead. Okay, so let me use that as an example again. I'm creating body oils. I have a line of body oils that I make in my home. Okay, I'm running my business from my home. Okay, and I need to come up with an estimate of how much it costs to run my business from my home. Okay, now to do that, the first thing that we need to do is to estimate the cost it takes to manage my business from my home, but over a given period. So we can say, for example, I use 1 month. So I'm going to come up with an estimate of how much it costs to run my business. It's a home-based business for a month. So these are all the costs associated with my business for a month. Okay. Then I need to determine the total man hours for that period. So how much time am I spending in my business? And the reason why I use the word man hours versus just total time is that if you have 2 or 3 people working with you in your home or in your business, in your facility, you need to add up their time as well. Because think about it. If you have 2 people working with you, the overheads to run your business is going to be more than if you only have 1 person. Because 2 people will use more utilities, more electricity, more space, more telecommunications. There might be higher insurance. There's just a higher cost when you have more people in your business. So that's the reason why I use the word man hours versus just a total time. So I'll go back to the business scenario. I'm one individual, so I'm working alone, where I make a line of body oils in my home, and every month I do about, let's say every week, let's say 20 hours a week, I dedicate towards my business. And let's say that there are four weeks, so that's 80 hours. Okay, so 80 hours. So each month, it's about 80 hours that I spend going through, about 80 hours I spend in my business. Okay, these costs are going to be automatically calculated, so there's nothing for you to do there. You just need to hop onto the overhead costs. So let us try and calculate this now. So what are the different costs for each item or activity? There are some options here, so you don't need to guess. You just need to go through the list and see if you can come up with some estimated costs. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be as a best estimate, unless if you have proper bookkeeping, which we will explore soon. How can we do proper bookkeeping? If you have bookkeeping, you can just enter those figures right here because you would have this data. But if you don't, we'll just come up with an estimate here. So if I'm running it from my home and I pay a mortgage of, let's say, $2,000 per month, let us estimate how much would I charge myself as rent. Okay, so in the home, I am effectively renting my business, right? Space for the period. So you may say, okay, for the month, I will pay a rent just so that we can come up with cost of $500, because the mortgages is $2,000. So I'm gonna allocate a rent of $500. Okay, and again, most of you are probably running your businesses from home. You need to do this exercise because not only do you need it for tax purposes, so when you're putting together your financials for your business, you need to be putting a cost towards these items. I won't get into that in too much detail now, but this is something that you really should be doing as a part of your own money management or account management. I have amount here. Typically, it's going to be one, you're paying rent once for the month, or each of these costs are going to be 1, 2, 3, etc. Okay. So that's total of 500. Then you're just gonna go through and pick some other things. So utilities, so your gas and electricity and water. Let's say on average that comes up to $300 a month. You may say, okay, my business might utilize $100 out of that. Okay, and that's just as a factor of 1. Okay, because you're paying utilities once for the month. Then We can just do the same thing. Insurance, are you paying insurance? Let's think about your car. You're using your car to pick up raw materials, to ship items, to whatever the case is, you have to use your car as a part of your business. If your insurance is $300 a month, you may say, okay, $50 is for the business. And so on and so on and so on. Lab supplies. So for example, you may buy lab supplies once a month, or you might be able to look at how much you spent for how much did you spend last year, and you might just divide that by 12 just to come up with a figure. Okay, so let's say that's $120 for the month. Usually the amount will be one, but I've put it where you can change that figure depending on what the item is. And then you're just gonna go through and do the same thing. So internet and phone, you may say, okay, that's $20 a month, etc. And you're just gonna go through and pick what you are doing. So let's say, for example, which many of us are using this as an example, software and technology costs. So if you are paying for a website subscription, if you are paying if you're part of this membership, well, that's not a software and technology cost, but that's more a membership cost. Or if you're paying for Gmail, so you have a business email and you're paying for Outlook or Gmail, you're paying for extra cloud storage because you want to have that for your business, or you're paying for inventory every month, or whatever it is. What software tech costs are you paying for your business? You're gonna put that in, okay? And you can have that in, and then you're just gonna go through and populate that. Now at the end, you will come up with a total. This is your total overhead cost, okay? This is how much it costs, the indirect costs, to manage your business. If you are not paying this, there is no business for you to produce your body oils, okay? So this is the reason why we do a calculation for overheads. When you do the calculations for your overheads, the spreadsheet then calculates an overhead as a cost per hour. So remember, each month you spend about 80 hours in your business. So for every hour you spend in your business, this is the overhead cost for every hour. And this will make sense when we get to labor, okay? Because when you are in the building making products, there are some costs, right? If you spend 10 hours making products, that's 10 hours where you're using electricity, you're using water, you're using internet, you're in a space. So there's rent, there is an insurance cost, there's some costs because you are in your home manufacturing, and we need to be able to factor in that cost. Okay, so once you do this, once you do it once, you don't need to do it again unless you have considerable changes in your overhead costs, meaning you are now moving out of your home and you're now renting a separate space, or you are hiring full-time staff. So you may hire a marketing and sales director, for example. They are not directly making products, so you would not factor them into labor, but you have to factor in their wages as a part of the overhead costs. And this also helps you to look at how your overheads compare with all the other costs that are going into your product, okay? So once you do this once, you don't have to do it again until there's considerable change in your overhead costs, okay? Are there any questions? If you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. I'm trying to, all right, there are no questions. Okay, good. All right, so let us hop over to inventory. So inventory is also one of those areas that you don't have to update all the time. You update it when you've added new inventory, okay? So once you do it once, unless there's considerable change in the cost of the goods, you don't have to keep updating this. You can have it as a running inventory, okay? So the point here is that you should spend some time setting up your pricing calculator so that you can easily spit out your product cost. So let us quickly go back to our formulation just as reference. Okay, so we have coconut oil, sweet almond oil, jojoba oil, vitamin E, and rosemary essential oil. So we know those are things we must have in inventory. We also must have bottles in inventory. We must also have caps in inventory, and we should also have dip slides in the inventory. And we would have put that on in our setup already. All right. So it will automatically have those options available to you. There we go. Okay, so we know we have coconut oil, sweet almond oil, etc., etc. So we're going to basically just add up we're gonna put in all the different items that we have in all the different items that we have in our inventory. So let's start at the very top. There's coconut oil. So we also need to calculate the cost per unit of the coconut oil. Okay, so usually when you buy the coconut oil, you get an invoice. Let's hide this just so that we don't have any we don't have that. So just for ease, I'm going to go to wholesale supplies plus, and I'm going to type in coconut oil. You should have your invoices. You should have, so once you buy coconut oil, you should have your invoice and you can check your price. All right, you should have so let's go here, and I'm just using this as an example. You would have a receipt with the information. So let's just say hypothetically, I bought 2 pounds at $8.35. That's $16.50. 1 pound is about, let's call it 500 grams just for ease. When you get your product in your lab, you will see on the packaging the actual weight. Now, formulations are always to be done using grams as the unit. So just ensure that you are converting the quantities to grams. So your total quantity, so you bought 500 grams of coconut oil. Okay, that's effectively what that is. Okay, so we go back here, you have an invoice that says 2 pounds of coconut oil for $16.70. Of course, it will have tax and shipping, okay? But I'm just simplifying it for the purposes of the example. So you bought 500 grams because 2 pounds is actually 1,000 grams. So let's just change that. So 2 pounds works out to 1,000 grams approximately. And I'm only doing that because our body oil formulation will require 800 grams. So we need more than a pound of coconut oil, but that's just a detail. So you're going to go through and you're going to enter each inventory item and cost, and it will automatically calculate the cost per gram of your product. So let's use another example, sweet almond oil. Okay. And then let's go and find our invoice. Okay, so we bought 1 pound of sweet almond oil at $11.45. So we'll just put that in, $11.45, and that's 500 grams. Okay, now the truth is you can utilize whatever unit you wish, but because your formulation is going to be written in grams, it makes sense that you convert everything to grams. If you're doing soap making and you may use ounces, you can use ounces here because your formulation may have ounces. But whatever unit your formulation is using, you're going to stick to that for your raw materials for the unit column. Okay. Then we're going to add the rest. So let me just quickly add the rest. I'll just drag this over to my next screen just for ease. And I'm going to pick jojoba oil. Here we go. Let's find jojoba oil. Okay, and we didn't need a lot of that, so we probably bought a pound, $28.45, 28.45, and we bought a pound in grams. And then vitamin E, let's say we bought 2 ounces, which I believe it's about 2 ounces for $13.45. And 2 ounces is about 60 grams, just for argument. Your packaging will have the weight in grams, should have the weight in grams or kilograms. If not, you can do an easy conversion, like a rule of thumb. And then we're gonna say rosemary essential oil. And let's say we bought 2 ounces of this as well, $20.95. $20.95, and about 60 grams as well. Okay. So, all right. So you will see, let's make it so it's smaller. So you will see here a breakdown of your inventory. It's really based on kind of the quantities that you have in stock. So it will show you, I mean, it's not terribly relevant, but it may be useful information for you. Okay. So let's just quickly add the packaging as well. So let's do bottle with cap. Let's do the vinyl label, and let's do the dip slide. And again, you just need to do this once. You don't need to do it often. So let's go to, they have containers. Let's say you're doing it in a blue bottle, $3.50 for 12 pieces. So you bought 12 pieces at $3.50. So then we're gonna go, well, let's find something that's a little bit bigger. It really doesn't matter. All right, doesn't matter. Let's just go ahead with this. All right, so you bought 12 at $3.50. So you're gonna go $3.50. You got 12, and you can just put units. And then the vinyl labels, let's go to sticker view. And let's say we're getting some square labels, and we're getting some small labels, let's say 2 by 2. We bought 50 at $57. Each, you can put unit or each, it doesn't really matter. And then the dip slide, let's just say paid $60 for 4 each. Okay. And we're gonna look, and that's a pretty pricey number, and we're gonna look at we're gonna see how a lot of this makes sense. So so you have this inventory table, right? So once you set that up once, again, you don't need to change this unless there are considerable changes in your inventories. Either you found a new supplier and the prices have gone down, or prices have gone up, or you're adding new things to inventory. You really just need to do this once. And please, it makes sense for you to do this when you are in the product development phase. So when you get raw materials, just add them here so that you can quickly price your products out. Okay. So, all right. So it says the highest price per unit is your dip slides. The highest price of material, something for $60. Your vinyl labels, that just gives you a quick snapshot of the things that are costing you a lot of money effectively. Okay. Then we go into product cost. So this is the good stuff. Okay. So the first thing you need to do, this table at the very top automatically populates. Okay. So you're going to hop to the general information section. Okay. You're going to put in the name of your product. You're gonna put in your SKU number or your stock keeping unit number. So you may say body oil, 1, 2, 3, 4, 23. Okay, hypothetically speaking. What is the packaging form? 2-ounce bottle. Number of units per batch. Now, this is very, very important when you are pricing. When you're doing product formulation, so you're just developing products, you may create a 500-gram batch, and that might give you, you know, a handful of units, right? That may give you, for 2 ounces, that may give you, I don't know, 10 or less units, okay? When you go into production, your batch size should increase. So you're no longer creating in grams, but you're creating in kilograms, right? So you may, for example, be creating 5 or 10 kilograms at one time, or let's use gallons. We may be doing 5 gallons at one time, okay? But just for argument's sake, just for or example, my body oil, I have that I'm creating 1,000-gram batch, and it will create, I'm gonna put 10 bottles, okay? Just for a nice round number, it will give me 10 bottles, okay? So my batch size, which I can calculate, how many bottles, how many units am I going to get out of a batch that I'm going to create, you're gonna put that number there. If you're just doing a single product, you can put 1. But it will not give you a realistic price, and I will show you why in a minute. Okay, so let's us for now, let's put 1, right? So you're only making 1 bottle, right? That's all you're making, 1 2-ounce bottle. So you're making a very, very small, very small unit, okay? Then you need to decide on profit margins. Now, in the masterclass, I go through how do you set the profit margin. Now, that is really up to you to decide what your profit margin will be. On average, in the bath and beauty space, profit margins are anywhere from 5% to 30%. It's not 100%, 200% as people think, because remember, you're covering all of your costs. You're covering your direct costs, you're covering your overhead costs. Your profit margin is really just the extra, right? And this is what allows your business to grow. In the fast-moving consumer goods space, you make money from volume, okay? Not necessarily from large profit margins, but from volume. So the more products you can get out there, that is how you're going to make your money. So I'm going to put 10%, okay, just for the purposes of this exercise. And then taxes, this is now dependent on where you live, where you're selling. You can put another 10% on top of that for your taxes. That will be based on your jurisdiction, okay? So you populate that, and everything will, that's it for that table. And you will see that it changes the name here automatically. Then you're going to actually put in your formulation for based on this here. So I'm going to change it back to 10 bottles because that's what I have set here. So let's just put 10 bottles here. 10 bottles. And now for my batch, so I've made 1,000 grams of product, and that's going to give me 10 units. And now I need to put in basically my batch record here, right? So how much of each raw material am I using in this batch of 10? And I'm just going to copy that over, because this I would have had I have to do this when I'm doing my own calculations. So for the batch, I'm using 800 grams of coconut oil. I'll drag this over so I can easily reference. 800 grams of, oops. Right, let's just quickly go through that. So I'm using 800 grams based on my formula. So this is, oops. So this is actual. This is not your percentage weight by weight. This is your actual amount that you're using in the batch. Okay, 800. Then sweet almond oil, 100. And then jojoba oil, 9. 9. I like it's 90. Vitamin E oil 5. And then rosemary essential oil 5. Okay. So this effectively is my batch record. It's not really my formulation. It is the total amount of actual raw materials that I've used in this batch of 10. So in total for the 10 units, this is the amount that I'm using. Yes, Selena, no problem. I understand. It's very early for you guys in the UK. Fine. Thanks so much for hopping on. This is all pre-recorded. So you can watch the rest of it. And if you have any questions, let me know. All right. So there we go. So those are the raw materials. Then we're gonna hop over to packaging materials. So we said we use bottle with cap. How many do we use? 1. And I'll just put units. Okay. And I use a vinyl sticker label, 1. Okay. And then we hop over to label. So this is now where I mentioned sometimes having different categories helps you to properly articulate the cost. If you're the only person doing everything in your business, you don't need to have so many different options unless you see in the foreseeable future that you will be hiring additional staff or employees at different pay scales. Okay. So if you say, okay, yes, in 6 months, I'm gonna have to hire somebody else and they will be paid X hourly rate to do this particular kind of work. So let us say right now I am doing everything myself. I can just select production and what is my rate? So what am I paying myself hourly to produce these goods? You need to decide. And I will caution you not to overinflate this because as you scale, just as I mentioned before, you will not be paying a very high hourly rate for production related work. Your high hourly rate is likely to come for your R&D work, which is a very different cost from production. Production tends to be line staff, so they're paid at a lower rate. So it is very important that you think in a kind of more, you have to think about long-term how your business will function. If your business will function for the next 2 years where it is you alone, you can pay yourself at a rate that you believe is reasonable for your own living expenses because you need to be able to pay yourself properly. Okay. So if for the foreseeable future, you will be a one-man or one-woman show, pay yourself at a rate which makes sense. Okay. So I'm going to put right now $20 per hour. And it takes me to make these 10 units, it takes me 5 hours. Okay. That is my estimation. This is how much it will take for me to do this one batch of 10 bottles. It will take me about 5 hours to do everything. So from sterilizing the bottles, actually pre-weighing all the raw materials, actually doing the production, doing my QA checks, labeling, packaging them and sending them off for shipment. That's total 5 hours. Okay, that's how much it will take. Now I'm going to hop over back to overhead, because remember when I mentioned in overhead, we have an overhead cost per hour. You spend 5 hours directly into your products, into production, 5 hours. But there is a cost to keeping you in that building, in your kitchen for 5 hours that you have to try to factor in, and that's in the overhead cost. So this particular table or spreadsheet uses this total number of hours. So let us say we added something else. So let us say, okay, to hop in a car, to ship it off, you're gonna pay Uber, it's just down the road, and you're gonna pay Uber to come and pick up and drop it off at the post office. And let's say that's $8 for an hour. And it's just an hour for them to do that, right? there's also kind of that, there's a kind of overhead costs that you have to kind of factor in that process as well. So the spreadsheet adds up the total number of hours and multiplies it by the overhead cost per hour. And that way, you are always factoring in those overhead costs to manage your business. It's factored into your product. All right. Then we hop over to other. So as we said, every batch we make, we always do an internal quality control check with our own dip site, and we put it into our incubator and we monitor that just to ensure that we don't have any unusual we don't have any unusual growth. Okay, so let's go to the data. Okay, so it automatically calculates the cost for us. So based on the data that we have put in, it costs each bottle, including our 10% profit margin or taxes or overhead and all our direct inputs. You should sell, or I should sell, a bottle of 2-ounce body oil for $23.79. Your material cost is $2.36, and it's all broken down here. So you can see the input cost, the relative costs, okay? All right. So $2.36 for the material cost. Packaging is about 14 cents. Seems very low. Yes, okay. Labor is $10.80. Other costs, for whatever reason, is just not picked up here. And overhead is $6.53. Okay. Now, if you look at this table, at this graph, there's something that seems a little strange. Why is the labor cost so high? Why is the overhead cost so high? And the reason why it is that high is because of this figure. When you are pricing your products, you need to price your products as a function of the largest possible batch size, because the 5 hours that it will take you to manufacture 10 bottles, it may take you the same 5 hours, maybe a little bit more, to manufacture 100 bottles. Okay, it may take you the very same amount to manufacture 100 bottles. So you realize your labor cost shifts from whatever it was before. Let me put back 10. It was $10 in labor. If you make 100, so instead of making a small 1,000 gram batch, just go ahead and make 5-gallon batch. Just make a big batch. And you'll find that that will drive your labor cost down. It will drive your overhead cost down as well. So you see overhead jumps from, let's change that to 10, $6.53. It changes it when I put it to 100, 65. And this is kind of the issue that I see when lots of people complain that, oh, when the price of your products, it's too high and I can't be competitive. Yes, it is too high and you cannot be competitive because you are manufacturing, you are calculating your cost at a very, very small amount, okay? And that is the reason why. So if you do a larger batch, the amount of time that you spend on 10 bottles, you will spend roughly the same amount of time when you just decide. You may spend 8 hours, it may take a whole day. But even if you change this to, let's change that to 8. Even if you change that, your labor cost is still reasonable. Your overhead cost is still reasonable. And you realize your price is now much lower. So you can be more competitive. And you know what is great about having a low price when you have this price is that you can now play around with like your profit margin. You can say, well, products like these are selling for even more and are doing very well. and I want to be able to compete in a more premium space. So I could increase my profit margin by 20% or even 100% and still remain, it's, I don't know why it's doing that, and still remain profitable. All right, and still remain profitable. Okay. So this is what I mean when you have to think, when you're pricing your products, you have to think of it in a more kind of broad sense. You can't be very narrowly focused on, oh, just my raw materials and my packaging materials, and then I come up with a price. You have to think through your labor costs, your overhead costs, other inputs that you're putting in, and how do you play around with your profit margins. And I promise you that as you do this, you will find that you can develop a sustainable business if you're very strategic with how you source your raw materials. If you're very strategic with how you source your packaging materials, you can create products that are very profitable. Even if you decide, because I know maybe initially $870, oh my God, overhead cost is so high. Yes, it's going to be very high if you have very low productivity. So if you're producing small quantities at a time, you're going to have very, very low productivity. If you have high levels of throughput, so you're doing high levels of production, which again has to be balanced against your sales, right? Because you can't just make a lot of products and they're not selling. So you have to ensure that you're doing active sales so that you can have high throughput. And if you have high throughput, meaning high levels of production, high levels of efficiency, you're going to find that this overhead cost per hour becomes very insignificant once you're increasing your productivity. Okay, so a lot of this will make a lot more sense if you watch the masterclass. Watch the masterclass, go through in detail, and then attempt to price your products. It will make so much more sense, and you will realize that this ultimate sales price, you feel very, very confident going to market with these. You can play around with your profit margins. You can play around with things like your raw material suppliers. So for example, when you're putting in your cost here, shop around. Can you find a supplier that is selling it for less than $16.70? You will end up reducing your price here. And another thing why this is also very useful, if you realize that your price is too high, you can look at your raw materials at this cost per unit, and you can determine whether you could potentially reduce this cost per unit. So for example, your rosemary essential oils is 35 cents per unit. If we go to, if we go here and we look at this here, we will also see which of these raw materials is contributing to a high price point. So your jojoba oil, for example, is of all the oils, it's $5.12. Now, could you reduce this 90 to 45, right? And move that 45 instead of, let's do it here, we can say 45, and we'll move the 45 here. And put 8.45. You'll find that this might actually adjust the price a little bit more. So right now it's $5.78. So let me go back and go back. So $5.78 versus $5.82 may not be significant, but it may give you a little bit of margin for a little bit more profit. And remember, we say volume is what we aim for. So those few cents, when you look at volume, can mean that you can come in at an even lower price point on the market. You can be a little bit more competitive with price, or you can play around with your profit margins a little bit more. Okay. So let me see if there are any questions. There are no questions at this time. I will be doing another similar tutorial again in the larger Facebook group at some point in time, but this is here right now for members only, so that you can utilize this right away. But I will be having a separate masterclass on pricing and using tools like this to help. Now, remember things, software like Inventora, for example, can calculate automatically your product pricing as well. But Inventora is a cost per month, $19 per month. So if you're on a budget, a spreadsheet will be a much easier option for you. All right. So if there are any questions at this time, please feel free to let me know. You can post them in the Facebook group. You can send me a member support question if you have any issues with regards to pricing. If you need any additional support, I'm also available for that as well. If you need support, if you need very direct support, meaning hand-holding support, just in case spreadsheets are difficult for you or math is difficult for you, we do have or one-on-one coaching option as well, or a done-for-you service. So if you don't want to have to do this at all and you prefer that we handle it for you, you can easily just give us your batch, a copy of your batch records and your suppliers, and we can go through and create these pricing calculators for you so that you have one that is specific for your business. So we will set up your entire inventory, we will put the pricing in for you, and you will have something that is totally customized for your business so that you can easily populate your product prices, or we can populate it for you as well if you wish.